AITA, for not allowing my ex in the delivery room. Because of his manipulative and controlling behavior, and his family called me cruel. He threw a tantrum, told everyone I was keeping him from his child, and made me question my decision. But weeks later, I found out the truth, and now I've the full custody of my child. Okay, so I, 27 female, just gave birth to my first child 2 weeks ago, and what should have been one of the happiest times in my life has been completely overshadowed by drama because I didn't want my baby's father, 30, male, in the delivery room. Now, half my family is calling me selfish and cruel, and I'm starting to wonder if I really was in the wrong. Let me start with some context. My ex, Jake, and I were together for about 3 years before I got pregnant. Our relationship was far from perfect. He had a lot of issues with control, and our fights always seemed to center around his inability to respect my boundaries. If I said I needed space, he'd follow me from room to room. If I needed to make a decision for myself, he'd find a way to guilt me into doing things his way. It got to the point where I felt like I couldn't breathe without checking in with him first. When I found out I was pregnant, we had already been on the rocks, but I stupidly thought that maybe a baby would force us to grow up and get our act together. Instead, things got worse. He started becoming possessive, accusing me of hiding things, and even went through my phone multiple times. He also constantly stressed me out by bringing up marriage and pressuring me into saying yes, even though I wasn't sure that's what I wanted. Eventually, I had to end things when I was about 5 months along, because I couldn't take the emotional exhaustion anymore. He didn't take it well, to put it lightly. Jake still wanted to be involved in the pregnancy, which I understood. I never planned to keep him from his child, but I also knew that I needed to protect my peace, especially leading up to the birth. He would text constantly, asking for updates, demanding to be at every appointment, and getting upset if I went to any without him. He even tried to tell me what I should eat and how I should handle my birth plan, as if I wasn't the one carrying the baby. If I craved something he deemed unhealthy, he'd immediately lecture me about how I was already failing as a mother and putting our child at risk. He would send me articles about prenatal diets, acting as if I wasn't already following my doctor's recommendations. At one point, he even tried to control what vitamins I was taking, insisting that the ones my doctor prescribed weren't good enough and that I should use the ones he found online instead. When it came to my birth plan, he was even worse. I had told him early on that I was open to pain management options, including an epidural, but he was adamantly against it. He kept saying that real mothers gave birth naturally and that using medication was just a way to take the easy way out. He even suggested that I give birth at home with a midwife instead of at the hospital because he read some blog that claimed hospitals push unnecessary interventions. I shut that down immediately, but he still brought it up repeatedly, acting like I was being unreasonable for wanting a hospital birth. It got to the point where every conversation with him felt like a battle. If I disagreed with him, he'd accuse me of not caring about the baby's health or tell me I was making emotional decisions instead of rational ones. He even had the audacity to call my OBGYN's recommendations just opinions and tried to convince me to switch doctors because he didn't like how she supported my choices. Fast forward to my 3rd trimester, and the conversation about the delivery room came up. He assumed he'd be there. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I tried to explain that giving birth is a medical procedure, one where I needed to feel safe and supported, and that I didn't trust him to be calm and respectful of my needs in such a vulnerable moment. Jake did not take this well. He freaked out, telling me I was robbing him of the experience, that I was being selfish, that he had a right to see his child being born. He even tried to guilt-trip me, saying that I was setting the tone for our co-parenting relationship and that I was already proving that I would push him out of our child's life. I stood my ground. My mom was my support person, and I didn't want anyone else in the room. I told him he could wait in the waiting area and that I'd make sure he got to see the baby as soon as possible after birth, but he refused to accept that. He kept telling me that my decision was cruel and that I was being unfair by treating him like he was some stranger instead of the baby's father. He said I was denying him the right to witness his child's first moments and that I was making a selfish decision just to punish him. My mom backed me up, telling him that this wasn't about him. It was about me and my health, both physically and mentally. But Jake wouldn't hear it. He kept repeating the same arguments over and over, as if badgering me enough would suddenly make me change my mind. Labor came, and sure enough, he tried to push his way into the hospital. He actually showed up at the nurses' station demanding to be let in, even though I had already made it clear to the hospital staff that I only wanted my mom present. The nurses had to get security to make him leave the area because he refused to listen. He apparently made a huge scene, insisting that they were denying him his rights as a father and trying to guilt-trip them into letting him in. When that didn't work, he started calling everyone he could think of. I later found out that he called my sister, my aunt, and even a couple of my friends, ranting about how I was keeping his child away from him. He told them I was being vindictive and controlling, and tried to get them to pressure me into letting him in, even though I was literally in labor and in no state to deal with his tantrum. After the birth, I did keep my word. I let him meet the baby as soon as I was settled in recovery, but even then, he made snide comments about how he should have been there and how it was unforgivable that I had deprived him of that moment. He acted like he was the victim, like he was the one who had gone through an exhausting and painful medical ordeal and completely ignored what I had just been through. He barely even acknowledged me. He didn't ask how I was feeling, didn't check to see if I was okay. He was just fixated on how unfair it was that he wasn't in the room. It was like the birth of our child wasn't even about the baby or me or what was best for us. It was just about him and his ego. Since then, he's been telling everyone that I was cruel and heartless for excluding him. He's painted himself as the poor, devoted father who just wanted to be there for his child, while I'm the bitter ex who wanted to hurt him out of spite. Some people agree with me, saying that birth is a medical event and that I had every right to decide who was in the room. Others, especially his family, think I was being completely unfair, saying that I should have put my feelings aside for the sake of our child's father. His mother even sent me a long, condescending message about how I owe Jake respect as the father and how I'm setting a bad precedent for co-parenting. The whole thing has left me emotionally drained. I know deep down that I made the best choice for me in that moment, but the constant backlash has made me question myself. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering if I was too harsh, if I should have just let him stay, despite how he made me feel. I wanted to do what was right for me and my baby, but now I'm wondering, was I the asshole for not letting him be in the delivery room? Update. Well, a lot has happened since I originally posted, and I wanted to give an update because things took a turn I never expected. At the time, I was struggling with guilt over not letting Jake in the delivery room, but now, I have zero regrets. If anything, I feel relieved that I set that boundary because I've since learned that Jake wasn't just manipulative, he was also a liar and a cheater. A few weeks after giving birth, I started hearing rumors about Jake being seen with another woman while I was pregnant. At first, I brushed it off as gossip, but then a mutual friend sent me screenshots of messages between Jake and this woman. It turns out he had been in a full-blown relationship with her for months before I even gave birth. And the worst part? He had been telling her that I was the one keeping him from the baby, making himself look like the victim, when in reality, he was barely making any effort beyond his public tantrums. When I confronted him, he denied it at first. But when I showed him the screenshots, he switched tactics and tried to justify it. He claimed that he was lonely, that I had pushed him away when I ended our relationship, and that he needed someone to be there for him. As if that somehow excused him lying to me and everyone else about what kind of father he really was. At that moment, everything clicked. This wasn't just about him wanting to be in the delivery room. This was about control. He wanted access to me, to my pregnancy, and to my labor on his terms, not because he actually cared, but because he wanted to make sure I was still within his reach. The moment I set boundaries, he lost his grip, and that's why he reacted the way he did. Thankfully, I had already been documenting everything: his controlling behavior during my pregnancy, his outbursts, his refusal to respect my decisions. So when I went to court to establish custody, I had plenty of evidence to show why I deserved full custody of my child. And guess what? I won. Jake was granted supervised visitation, but honestly, he hasn't even bothered to use it much. For all his yelling about his rights as a father, he's barely shown up when given the chance. I suspect it's because his new girlfriend isn't as interested in playing stepmom as he thought she'd be. As for me, I feel free. I'm focusing on my baby and my own happiness, and I have zero regrets about not letting Jake into the delivery room. That day was about me and my child, and knowing what I know now, I'm beyond grateful that I protected my peace. So, to everyone who told me I wasn't the asshole, you were right. I wasn't, and now I have my beautiful baby, a drama-free home, and a future without Jake's manipulation weighing me down.